Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we'll take a look at what cranks are. One of the most mysterious, terrifying, and deadly creatures to have emerged in fiction is the crank, a macabre creation of the flare virus, whose existence has tested the limits of human survival. With their overwhelming aggression and their ability to turn people into uncontrollable monsters, cranks represent a threat that seems impossible to avoid. That's why in this video, I will explain in detail the history and origins of the cranks. And for that, I will give you a summary of their story in the different movies. Then I'll talk about their physical appearance, their personality, their incredible abilities, and how to survive and defeat these creatures. Cranks are people infected by the flare virus, which is responsible for the global epidemic in the Maze Runner saga. To truly understand their existence, we must first analyze the context in which they arise and how they evolve into the terrifying creatures we know. Throughout human history, various diseases have devastated entire populations. But the flare virus is not just a common plague. It is a curse that erases the very essence of humanity. The flare virus was designed as a biological weapon, but ended up escaping the control of its creators. In a world devastated by natural disasters and resource scarcity, government elites and the wicked organization saw it as necessary to reduce the population to ensure the survival of humanity. The problem was that the flare turned out to be much more destructive than expected. When a person is infected, the virus progressively attacks the brain, slowly destroying cognitive functions and self-control. In its early stages, the infected can still reason and hold conversations, although they already show changes in personality and slight aggression. As the virus advances, the person completely loses their humanity and turns into a crank. But when is it considered that someone has stopped being human and become a crank? There are theories within the Maze Runner universe suggesting that the transition is not as abrupt as it seems. Some infected individuals manage to remain in an intermediate state for a long time, internally battling the disease and resisting their murderous instinct. This leads us to consider the possibility that the flare doesn't just destroy the brain, but also alters the perception of reality, pushing its victims toward madness in a much more terrifying way. The transformation from an infected person to a crank doesn't happen overnight. It is a progressive process that can last days, weeks, or even months, depending on the individual's resistance. Some examples in the saga show that the most dangerous and deranged cranks have gone through years of infection before reaching their peak of madness and violence. An interesting case in the story is that of Newt, who was infected by the flare, but managed to maintain his sanity for an extended period. This leads us to wonder if some individuals have a greater resistance to the virus, or if certain psychological factors can delay the complete transformation. Could love, hope, or the will to live influence the progress of the disease? This idea has been explored in several theories, suggesting that those with strong emotional bonds may cling to their humanity for a longer time. Another terrifying aspect of the transformation is the way cranks begin to develop cannibalistic behavior. It's not just aggression that makes them monsters, but the need to feed on other humans. This could indicate that the virus not only alters the mind, but also the metabolism and biological needs of the infected. Some stories within the Maze Runner universe mention groups of cranks that form primitive communities, hunting down the few remaining humans as prey. In a world where infection is a death sentence, the fear of cranks has led humanity to take extreme measures. Protected cities have become fortresses where the infected are exterminated mercilessly at the slightest sign of the disease. However, there are also settlements where cranks, in their early stages, try to live a relatively normal life, always under the shadow of their inevitable fate. Some theories within the saga suggest that Wicked experimented with the possibility of finding a cure for the flare, but in reality, their intention was to control the infection in certain individuals to create a new form of human, more resistant and adaptable to the new reality. Could it be that the cranks are the first step toward an evolution imposed by the virus? Is it possible that some of them develop immunity or superior abilities instead of simply being doomed to madness? The mystery surrounding the origin of the cranks and their true nature still leaves many unanswered questions. The only thing for sure is that once someone is infected, their fate is sealed. Some face it with resignation, others fight until the end, but all ultimately succumb to the flare sooner or later. And in a world where humanity has already lost so much, the fear of becoming a crank is perhaps the greatest terror of all. Now that we've thoroughly covered their history, I want to talk to you about the physical appearance of cranks, what we know about their personality and behavior, and I'll explain their incredible abilities and how to survive and defeat these creatures. The cranks undergo a grotesque and terrifying physical transformation that gradually strips them of their humanity. In the early stages, they can still pass as sick humans, with pale skin, reddened and swollen eyes due to fever, and an expression of extreme exhaustion. However, as the infection progresses and the virus attacks their brain, their appearance deteriorates alarmingly. Their skin becomes dry and scaly, developing pustules and open wounds, especially around the mouth and extremities, which could be an effect of compulsive scratching caused by a burning sensation beneath the skin. Some cranks show signs of severe dehydration, with cracked lips and skin pulled tight over bones, while others appear bloated and covered in bruises, suggesting that the disease doesn't progress exactly the same way in each individual. Their hair becomes greasy, dirty, and messy, with strands falling out as the infection advances. In many cases, partial or total baldness is common in more advanced cranks, likely due to malnutrition or cellular degeneration caused by the virus. Their eyes, which initially only reflect suffering, eventually take on a wild and crazed look, with dilated pupils and erratic movements. This could be related to the progressive neurological damage that causes them to lose control of their impulses, explaining why their facial expressions become inhuman, with forced smiles, spasmodic grimaces, and involuntary tics. One of the most striking changes is the deformation of their bodies. Over time, cranks lose large amounts of weight, becoming skeletal, with bones protruding from their diseased skin. This could be due to the virus speeding up metabolism or preventing the body from efficiently absorbing nutrients. Their nails elongate and thicken, taking on the appearance of claws, which could be a biological defense mechanism driven by the virus to make them more lethal in close combat. The crank's teeth undergo a notable transformation. Initially, they just turn yellow and rotten due to poor hygiene, but in advanced stages, many appear to have sharpened, leading to the theory that the virus induces a mutation in the dental structure to facilitate their cannibalistic behavior. In the wilder cranks, the gums are receded, and the teeth seem more prominent, resembling the dentition of a predator. Their jaws also seem to acquire abnormal strength, allowing them to tear flesh with ease. The virus also affects their mobility. At first, the infected show clumsiness and a loss of coordination, but once they enter the rabid phase, their movements become erratic and spasmodic, combining high-speed runs with hunched postures and unpredictable jumps. This suggests that the flare not only damages the brain, but also alters how the nervous system controls muscles. In some cases, the cranks appear to move as if their joints are out of place, which could be due to extreme bone wear or the virus's hyperactivity in their motor system. In the final stages, the cranks are no longer recognizable as humans. Their bodies are so deteriorated that they appear as moving corpses, with torn skin, sunken eyes, and an expression that reflects pure rage and murderous instinct. Some fans have speculated that the virus, originally designed as a population control weapon, may have been altered to induce a transformation beyond madness, turning cranks into true mindless killing machines. This would explain why, unlike other types of infected in science fiction, the cranks don't die quickly despite their deterioration, but seem to survive until their bodies completely collapse. The cranks begin to show changes in their personality that reflect the internal struggle against the flare virus. In the early stages, they still retain their identity and memories, but their behavior becomes more erratic and unpredictable. They feel irritable, anxious, and paranoid, reacting exaggeratedly to any situation. Some try to hold on to their humanity, fighting against the aggressive impulses that gradually become more intense. However, the virus deteriorates their mind, affecting their reasoning ability and making them increasingly unstable. As the infection progresses, the cranks experience episodes of delirium and hallucinations. Their paranoia intensifies, leading them to believe that everyone is against them, even their own friends or family. They begin to lose their sense of reality, confusing their own thoughts with voices in their heads. Their emotions are volatile, alternating between sadness, fear, and extreme rage in a matter of seconds. At this point, although they can still speak and communicate, their speech becomes erratic and often nonsensical. When the infection reaches its advanced stages, the cranks completely lose their humanity. They are no longer able to hold coherent conversations or remember who they were. Their behavior becomes entirely savage, dominated by violence and uncontrolled aggression. They attack without apparent reason, guided only by instinct and rage, as if their sole purpose is to destroy everything around them. They are unpredictable, sometimes emitting hysterical laughter or inhuman screams, suggesting that the virus has completely distorted their perception of the world. Although at first glance they may appear to act randomly, their behavior follows certain primitive patterns. They group together in packs, showing a kind of chaotic bond between them, though without any true organization. Some may stalk their victims or pretend to submit in order to deceive, suggesting that they still retain fragments of basic intelligence. However, any trace of empathy or awareness disappears completely. In their final moments, the cranks are nothing more than shadows of what they once were, trapped in irreversible madness and doomed to a fate of pure despair and brutality. The cranks develop abilities that make them incredibly dangerous, some of which could have theoretical explanations or examples in fiction of how they might arise. In the early stages of the infection, they still retain some of their human intelligence, which allows them to use tactics of deception and manipulation. This can be seen as an extension of the basic intelligence that the virus preserves in its early stages. For example, in The Maze Runner, some cranks can pretend to be weakened or harmless, only to attack when least expected, similar to the hunting tactics of predators like felines, who play with their prey before pouncing. This ability to feign weakness and then strike unexpectedly could be explained by how the virus alters cognitive and emotional control abilities, making the cranks more unpredictable. As the virus progresses, their motor skills improve in a supernatural way. Cranks in the intermediate stages can run at high speeds, with erratic but fast movements, which could be related to the acceleration of metabolism and stimulation of the nervous system. In zombie films, a similar ability is observed in the infected of 28 Days Later, who, despite technically being dead, display extreme speed and agility due to the infection of the rage virus. It is a theory that the flare virus could be causing a similar effect to this fictional virus, altering pain perception and physical capabilities to maximize aggression and speed. Additionally, pain resistance is one of the most notable characteristics of the cranks. A clear example of this is when a crank continues fighting despite having suffered serious injuries, such as a broken leg or severed limbs. This can be explained by an alteration in their central nervous system, where the virus possibly inhibits pain signals or converts them into a secondary sensation in the drive to hunt. This phenomenon of extreme pain resistance is also a recurring theme in other fictional creatures, such as the clickers from The Last of Us, who are able to attack without regard to the injuries they've sustained due to the mutation and brain damage they experience. In the final stages, the superhuman strength of the cranks becomes one of their most lethal traits. They are capable of breaking doors, scaling structures, and even knocking down multiple people with a single charge. This suggests that the virus is not only affecting their minds, but also enhancing their physical capabilities to the extreme. Theoretically, the virus could be altering the way their muscles and bones function, making them more resistant and less susceptible to damage. This could be compared to the mutation of creatures in fiction that acquire extreme physical abilities, such as superheroes in comics or movies, where the virus or genetic alteration provides outstanding physical power to cope with the need to survive in a hostile world. Lastly, the cranks exhibit group behavior in their more advanced stages, stalking and attacking in packs. This behavior is reminiscent of animal species like wolves or hyenas, who hunt and coordinate their attacks to eliminate their prey more effectively. This theory could be based on the fact that the flare virus, despite reducing cognitive ability, still preserves certain instances of instinctive behavior. Surviving and defeating the cranks, one of the most terrifying and unpredictable creatures created by the flare virus, is an extremely difficult task that would require a combination of physical, mental, tactical, and technological strategies. Below, I will break down in detail how someone could survive and defeat the cranks, exploring theories, examples, and expert explanations of what it would mean to face these creatures. The first and most important thing to survive a crank attack is to remain calm. The situation will be extremely chaotic and terrifying, but it is essential not to panic. Just like in other extreme stress situations, such as survival movies or even real-life emergency scenarios, the ability to think clearly is crucial. In The Maze Runner, when the characters face the cranks, we see that those who manage to stay calm and not succumb to fear have a better chance of surviving, even if only for a limited time. The flare virus destroys cognitive ability, but it does not completely nullify reasoning. This implies that the cranks, although unpredictable, are still responsive to stimuli, which could be taken advantage of by someone who remains calm and focused. If the person knows that the cranks act on impulse and desperation, they can predict their movements and behaviors more accurately. Since the cranks are extremely aggressive and powerful, direct contact should be avoided at all costs. Distance will be your best ally. In 28 Days Later and Other Mass Infection Stories, one of the most effective survival methods is simply staying out of the reach of the infected. This involves using intelligence to avoid being detected and attacked. The cranks, although fast, are unpredictable, so you will need to find elevated or hard-to-reach refuges to minimize the risk. The cranks, although fast and fierce, do not have extremely sharp vision in the early stages of the infection. Taking advantage of this, distractions such as distant sounds or manipulating the environment can be used to make the cranks stray from their path. The theory behind this approach is that the virus does not affect sensory perception uniformly, and a human could use stealth to elude the cranks for a time. To combat the cranks, one of the best strategies is the use of physical traps and barriers, like those found in many apocalyptic survival films. Using the environment to your advantage will be essential, creating obstacles that the cranks cannot easily overcome. In The Walking Dead, the characters build fortifications or use vehicles to block paths, a tactic equally viable against the cranks. The nature of the cranks could allow for the use of psychological barriers to slow their advance. Since the cranks tend to be extremely violent and erratic, They could be drawn to enclosed areas or traps designed specifically to limit them in number. Isolation and containment would remove much of their physical advantage, allowing a smaller group or even a single person to have more control. To defeat the cranks, it is essential to know where to strike. Their weak points are primarily their brain and nervous system. Although the flare virus seems to enhance their physical resistance, it does so at the cost of mental and cognitive control. This could mean that instead of direct attacks, precise strikes to their nervous system, such as the head or spinal cord, would be most effective. In The Walking Dead, zombies are defeated with a shot to the head. This concept could also apply to the cranks, where the brain, which is literally being consumed by the virus, becomes a key target. A direct blow to the head with a high-caliber firearm or a well-aimed axe could disable a crank instantly, stopping their movement and aggression. The importance of having long-range weapons, such as rifles or pistols with telescopic sights, is clear here, as it would allow you to attack from a distance without exposing yourself to close combat. Although the cranks are dominated by rage and instinct, they may still have remnants of their humanity. Some characters in The Maze Runner manage to distract the cranks, exploiting their emotional or psychological vulnerabilities. This is more theoretical, but if the virus does not completely erase human awareness, it is possible that certain points of connection could still be exploited. Distractions are key, such as using sounds, lights, or movements from a distance to draw the cranks into a specific area and then closing the way. The virus may alter the mind, but it does not completely erase neural connections. This implies that by creating a sufficiently complex situation, you could manipulate the emotions of a crank, leading them to erratic behavior that allows you to escape or even defeat them. Using other cranks as bait could also be a viable tactic. In the final stage of infection, the cranks lose much of their coordination and motor control, making them more vulnerable to precision attacks. This deterioration can be exploited to anticipate their movements, avoiding their erratic charges, and using their clumsiness against them. You might be able to trap them in places where their lack of physical control becomes an obstacle, such as narrow hallways or difficult terrain. As the cranks advance in the infection, their ability to move in a coordinated manner decreases. This would be the ideal time to confront them. Understanding that the rage and hunting instinct of the cranks become more erratic over time, you can exploit this pattern to attack when they are more disorganized, reducing their ability to respond. In an apocalyptic world like the one in The Maze Runner, where resources are scarce, the use of advanced technology would be crucial to defeating the cranks. This includes using surveillance drones to monitor their movements, specialized weapons, such as sniper rifles or flamethrowers, to keep a safe distance, and engineering tools to create impenetrable barricades. Long-range weapons, controlled explosions, and mechanical traps could be the key to dismantling groups of cranks without direct confrontation. In The Walking Dead, we see how characters use armored vehicles and advanced firearms to eliminate large numbers of zombies. This could be applied to the fight against the cranks, where an armored vehicle, a high-precision sniper rifle, or an automatic weapons system could be highly effective at eliminating multiple cranks from a distance without exposing survivors to the risk of being attacked directly. And that would be all we know so far about these creatures known as cranks. The first time I saw these creatures, I didn't think they would be so difficult to defeat or deal with. I thought it would be something like The Last of Us, but they surprised and scared me quite a bit. But let me know your opinion in the comments. Did you already know about the cranks? Do you think these creatures could really exist? And finally, if you ever encountered one, what would you do? Share your answers to these questions and your general opinion on the cranks from The Maze Runner. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, share it to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of my new videos.